Hi Reddit. I'm writing this here because I'm lost and don't know where else to turn. This is a throwaway account because this whole thing is too personal to share with anyone who knows me. My name is Matt, 36M, and I've been married to my wife, Laura, 34F, for 8 years. We live in Denver, Colorado, where I work as a civil engineer, and Laura works as an art teacher at a local high school. Or at least, she used to. Things have gotten complicated. Our marriage was solid, at least, I thought it was. Laura has always been the artsy, free-spirited type, while I'm more practical. We've always complemented each other in that way. She brings creativity and light into my life, and I ground her when things get chaotic. That balance worked for us, or so I believed. It all started a few months ago when I began noticing small changes in Laura. She started coming home later than usual, often saying she was working on a new art installation for a local gallery. That wasn't out of character for her. She's passionate about her art, and late nights at the studio weren't uncommon. But something felt different. She seemed distracted, lost in her thoughts, and when I'd ask her about her day, her answers were short and vague. The first real red flag came one Saturday when I decided to surprise her by bringing lunch to her studio. Laura had mentioned she'd be working on a mural all weekend, and I thought it would be nice to stop by and spend some time with her. When I arrived, though, her studio was empty. No paint, no canvas, no sign that anyone had been there recently. Confused, I called her. "Hey," I said when she answered. "I'm at your studio. Where are you?" There was a brief pause before she responded. "Oh, I stepped out to grab some supplies," she said, her voice tight. "I'll be back soon." I didn't push it, but something about her tone didn't sit right with me. When she came home that evening, I casually asked about her project, and her explanation was vague and unconvincing. My gut told me something was off, but I brushed it aside, not wanting to jump to conclusions. A week later, while cleaning up the kitchen, I found a receipt tucked under some papers on the counter. It was for a local hotel, a boutique place downtown, and it was dated for the previous Thursday, a day Laura had claimed to be working late. The receipt showed 2 drinks from the rooftop bar and a room charge. My stomach dropped. When Laura came home that evening, I confronted her. "Hey, I found this receipt," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "Were you at the Mason last week?" Her eyes widened for a split second before she forced a smile. "Oh, yeah," she said. "I had drinks with a couple of coworkers after the gallery opening. We rented a room to use as a storage space for the equipment." Her explanation was plausible, but it didn't erase my unease. Something about the way she said it felt rehearsed. I decided not to press her further, at least, not yet. Over the next few weeks, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Laura's behavior grew more erratic. She started taking her phone with her everywhere, even to the bathroom, and she would get defensive whenever I asked her about her plans. One day, while she was out, I decided to check the location history on her phone. It felt invasive, but my suspicions were eating me alive. What I found left me stunned. One of her recent locations was an abandoned water park on the edge of town. It hadn't been operational for years, and it was miles away from anywhere she would need to be for work or her art projects. Why would she go there? I decided to investigate. The next day, I left work early and drove to the water park. The place was eerily quiet, its once vibrant slides and pools now faded and overgrown. I didn't find anything unusual at first, but then I noticed a small, newer lock on the gate to one of the maintenance buildings. It was strange. Why would anyone bother securing something in a place like this? I took a photo of the lock in the building and decided to confront Laura about it that evening. That evening, I waited for Laura to come home, rehearsing how I was going to bring up what I'd found. When she walked in, she seemed cheerful, almost too cheerful, like she was compensating for something. "Hey, how was your day?" she asked, setting her bag down by the door. "Fine," I said, my tone neutral. "How was yours?" "Good. Busy," she replied, grabbing a glass of water and sitting across from me at the kitchen table. The usual. I took a deep breath. "Laura, I need to ask you something," I said, my voice steady but firm. "Why were you at the old water park last week?" Her face froze, the color draining from her cheeks. "What?" she asked, her voice shaky. "I saw it in your location history," I said. "You were there." "Why?" She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. After a few seconds of silence, she said, I went there for inspiration. You know, for my art. The decay, the textures, it's really fascinating." Her answer was plausible. Laura had always been drawn to unconventional places for inspiration, But her delivery didn't convince me. She wasn't looking me in the eye, and her hands were trembling slightly. Then why didn't you tell me about it? I pressed. Why keep it a secret? I didn't think it was a big deal, she said quickly. I didn't want you to think I was wasting time exploring instead of working. Her explanation felt thin, but I decided to let it go for the moment. Pushing too hard might only make her shut down further. Laura's response only made me more suspicious. Over the next few days, I couldn't stop thinking about the water park and the locked maintenance building. Something about it felt off, and I needed to know more. On Saturday, while Laura was out running errands, I decided to go back to the water park. This time, I brought a pair of bolt cutters with me, feeling a strange mix of guilt and determination. I told myself that if there was nothing unusual inside, I'd leave it alone. But if there was something, I needed to know. When I arrived, the park was as desolate as before. The only sounds were the wind rustling through the weeds and the distant hum of traffic from the highway. I made my way to the maintenance building, my heart pounding in my chest. The lock was still there, shining like a beacon against the rusty gate. I hesitated for a moment before cutting the lock. The clank of the bolt cutters echoed through the empty park. I pulled the gate open and stepped inside. The interior of the building was dark and musty, with the faint smell of mildew in the air. It was mostly empty, save for some old equipment and broken furniture. But then I noticed something that didn't belong, a large blanket spread out on the floor, along with an empty wine bottle and 2 glasses. My stomach churned. Nearby, I spotted a small notebook. I picked it up and flipped through it, my hands trembling. It contained sketches, Laura's sketches. There were detailed drawings of the water park, but there were also notes scribbled in the margins. Sunset here is perfect. Such a private spot. He says this feels like our own little world. The word jumped out at me like a slap to the face. I felt a wave of nausea as the implication sank in. Laura wasn't coming here for inspiration. She was meeting someone. That night, I confronted Laura again, this time armed with the evidence I'd found. I went back to the water park, I said as she sat down for dinner. Her face immediately tensed, but I pushed forward. I found the maintenance building. I saw the blanket, the wine, and your sketches. Her fork clattered onto her plate. You went there? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Yes, I said. And I need you to tell me the truth, Laura. What's going on? Who is he? Her face crumpled, and for a moment, I thought she was going to deny it. But instead, she buried her face in her hands and started crying. It's not what you think, she said between sobs. It's not serious. I don't know what it is. It's stupid, and I hate myself for it. I felt a surge of anger. Not serious? You've been sneaking around behind my back, meeting him in some abandoned water park, and you're telling me it's not serious. I was lonely, she said, her voice breaking. You've been so busy with work, and I felt like we were drifting apart. I know that's not an excuse, but it's the truth. Her words stung, but they didn't justify what she'd done. Who is he? I demanded. I want to know. She hesitated before finally whispering. His name is Mark. He's a photographer I met at the gallery. After Laura admitted to meeting Mark at the gallery, I felt like the floor had been ripped out from under me. My mind was spinning with questions, each more painful than the last. I needed answers, no matter how much they might hurt. How long has this been going on? I asked, my voice trembling with a mix of anger and desperation. Laura hesitated, looking down at her hands. A few months, she finally said. It started as innocent conversations about art. He was interested in my work, and we started talking more. At first, it was just friendly, but then it turned into something more. Something more, I repeated bitterly. And by something more, you mean sneaking off to an abandoned water park with wine and blankets? She winced at my words, tears streaming down her face. It was never supposed to go that far, Matt. I swear. I didn't mean to hurt you. But you did, I snapped. You didn't just hurt me. You lied to me. You broke my trust, and you made me question everything about our marriage. How could you do this? Laura's sobs grew heavier, but I couldn't bring myself to comfort her. I wanted to, but the betrayal was too fresh, too raw. I don't know, she whispered. I felt like I was losing myself, like I wasn't enough anymore. Mark, he made me feel seen. Her words stung like a slap to the face. Seen? I said, my voice rising. I've always seen you, Laura. I've supported your art, your dreams. And this is how you repay me. I know, she said. I know I've been selfish and stupid. I hate myself for what I've done. I don't know how to fix this. For the next few days, Laura and I barely spoke. She stayed in the guest room, giving me space while I tried to process everything. My emotions were a whirlwind: anger, sadness, confusion, and even guilt. I kept replaying our marriage in my mind, wondering if I had missed the signs, if there was something I could have done differently to prevent this. I confided in my best friend, Eric, not to be confused with the other Eric. We'd been friends since college, and I knew he'd give me honest advice. "Man, that's rough," Eric said after I told him everything. "I can't believe Laura would do that to you. What are you going to do?" "I don't know," I admitted. "Part of me wants to throw her out and never look back. But another part of me, I still love her, Eric. I hate what she did, but I can't just turn off my feelings." Eric nodded. "That's understandable. But you need to figure out what you want. Do you think you can forgive her? Do you even want to try?" "I don't know," I said again. "I feel like I need more answers before I can make a decision." The more I thought about it, the more I realized I needed to confront Mark. I wanted to hear his side of the story, to understand why he thought it was okay to insert himself into my marriage. So I found his Instagram profile. Laura had mentioned he was a photographer and messaged him, asking to meet. To my surprise, he agreed. We met at a coffee shop downtown. When I walked in, he was already sitting at a table, looking uncomfortable. He stood when he saw me and extended his hand, but I ignored it. "Thanks for meeting me," I said, my voice cold. "Of course," he replied, sitting back down. "I figured you'd want to talk. I didn't waste any time. How long have you been seeing my wife?" I asked bluntly. Mark sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Look, Matt, I never meant to cause problems. It just happened. I know that's not what you want to hear, but it's the truth." "Not what I want to hear?" I said, my voice rising slightly. "You've been sneaking around with my wife, meeting her at some abandoned water park, and you think it just happened is an excuse?" He flinched at my words, guilt written all over his face. "I'm sorry," he said. "I know I crossed a line. I shouldn't have let it get as far as it did." "You think?" I snapped. "Do you even care about the damage you've caused? About what you've done to my marriage?" "I do," he said quietly. "And for what it's worth, I've already ended things with Laura. I told her it wasn't right and that she needed to focus on her marriage." His words caught me off guard. "When?" I asked. "Last week," he said. "After the last time we met at the water park. I realized it wasn't fair to any of us, and I didn't want to be the reason your marriage fell apart." I stared at him, unsure of what to say. Part of me wanted to punch him, but another part of me appreciated his honesty. "I'm sorry, Matt," he said again. "I know that doesn't fix anything, but I am." I nodded stiffly, standing up to leave. "Stay away from her," I said. "If I find out you've been in contact with her again, we'll have a different kind of conversation." "Understood," he said, his expression serious. After my conversation with Mark, I felt a strange mix of emotions. On one hand, I was furious that he had ever gotten involved with Laura. But on the other hand, his honesty made me wonder if there was still hope for my marriage. If he had truly ended things and Laura was willing to do the work, could we move past this? That night, I sat down with Laura for another conversation. She looked nervous, her eyes red from crying. "I talked to Mark," I said, watching her reaction. She nodded slowly. "I figured you might. He told me he ended things," I continued. "Is that true?" "Yes," she said. "He told me it wasn't fair to keep going, and he was right. I should have ended it long before that." "And now what?" I asked. "What do you want, Laura?" She looked me in the eye, her voice steady. "I want to fix this, Matt. I want to fix us. I know I've broken your trust, and I know it won't be easy, but I'll do whatever it takes. I love you." Her words sounded genuine, but I knew action spoke louder. "If we do this," I said, "you have to be all in. No more lies, no more secrets. Total transparency." "I understand," she said. "And I agree. Whatever it takes, Matt." The days following my conversation with Laura and Mark were some of the most emotionally exhausting of my life. On one hand, I felt an overwhelming sense of betrayal, a pain that gnawed at me every time I thought about Laura sneaking off to meet Mark. On the other hand, I saw genuine remorse in her eyes, in her actions, and in the way she was trying to rebuild the trust she had shattered. I was standing at a crossroads, unsure which path to take. One night, as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, Laura knocked softly on the door of the guest room where I'd been sleeping. I debated whether to answer, but before I could make up my mind, she spoke through the door. "Matt," she said, her voice trembling. "Can I come in?" I hesitated, then finally said, "Yeah." She opened the door and stepped inside, her face etched with exhaustion and sadness. She was holding a notebook in her hands. I've been writing down everything I've been feeling since this all started, she said, sitting down in the chair near the bed. I don't know if it'll help, but I want to share it with you. I sat up, eyeing the notebook warily. What's in it? Everything, she said. Why I did what I did, how I feel about you, and what I want for us moving forward. I don't expect it to fix anything, but I need you to know where I stand. She handed me the notebook and left the room, giving me space to read it. I opened it reluctantly, unsure of what to expect. The first few pages were filled with raw, emotional entries. Laura wrote about feeling disconnected from me, about how she had buried her feelings of loneliness for months, hoping they would go away. She admitted that meeting Mark had been a mistake from the start, but explained that she had been drawn to the way he made her feel validated, seen, and appreciated. Reading her words hurt more than I expected. Seeing her thoughts laid out so plainly made it impossible to deny the depth of her emotions, both good and bad. But what struck me the most was the repeated refrain in her entries. I love Matt. I've always loved Matt. I hate what I've done to him, and I'll never forgive myself if I lose him. One entry in particular stood out. The Waterpark was supposed to be a place where I could escape, but every time I was there, I thought about Matt. I thought about how much I missed the way we used to be, how much I wished I could turn back time. Mark was a distraction, but he was never what I truly wanted. What I want is my husband back. By the time I finished reading, I didn't know what to feel. Her words were honest, heartfelt, and full of regret, but they didn't erase what had happened. The notebook was a step in the right direction, but it wasn't enough on its own. The next morning, I sat down with Laura at the kitchen table, the notebook in front of me. I read it, I said. She looked nervous. And, I can see that you're sorry, I said. I can see that you're trying. But words aren't enough, Laura. If we're going to move forward, I need more than just apologies. I need action. She nodded, her eyes filled with determination. I understand. What do you need from me? Transparency, I said. I need to know everything, where you are, who you're with, what you're doing. No more secrets, no more excuses. And we need to go to counseling. Both of us. I'll do it, she said without hesitation. Whatever it takes. We scheduled our first couples therapy session for the following week. Neither of us had ever been to therapy before, and I didn't know what to expect. The therapist, Dr. Ramsey, was a calm, soft-spoken woman who immediately made me feel at ease. She started by asking us to share why we were there. I cheated, Laura said, her voice trembling. I betrayed my husband's trust, and I don't know how to fix it. And you, Matt? Dr. Ramsey asked, turning to me. I feel like I don't even know Laura anymore, I admitted. I don't know if I can trust her again. But I also don't know if I'm ready to give up on us. Dr. Ramsey nodded thoughtfully. Rebuilding trust after infidelity is one of the hardest things a couple can go through, she said. But it's not impossible. The key is honesty, vulnerability, and a willingness to confront the pain head-on. Over the course of the session, Laura opened up about her feelings of loneliness and insecurity, while I shared my anger and sadness. It was uncomfortable and emotionally draining, but it also felt like a step toward understanding each other again. That night, as we sat together on the couch, I felt a small glimmer of hope. It wasn't much, but it was enough to keep me from giving up entirely. Laura reached for my hand, and for the first time in weeks, I didn't pull away. I know it's going to take time, she said softly. But I'm not going anywhere, Matt. I'll be here, every step of the way. I nodded, still unsure of what the future held, but willing to take it one day at a time. The road ahead was uncertain, but at least we were taking the first steps together. The days following our first therapy session were filled with a mix of cautious optimism and emotional exhaustion. Therapy had opened up a floodgate of emotions that neither Laura nor I had been fully prepared to confront. For me, the sessions were like holding a mirror up to our marriage, forcing me to see both the cracks that led to her betrayal and the parts of myself I hadn't wanted to acknowledge. Laura, for her part, threw herself into the process with everything she had. She started journaling more, attending individual therapy sessions, and making an effort to communicate with me in ways she never had before. She kept her phone unlocked and accessible, and she gave me her schedule for every day, even when I didn't ask for it. These gestures were small, but they helped rebuild a foundation of trust that had been obliterated by her actions. But trust is a tricky thing. Even with all her efforts, I couldn't shut off the voice in my head that whispered doubts every time she left the house or glanced at her phone. I knew that rebuilding trust wasn't about her proving herself. It was about me choosing to believe her again. That choice, however, was harder than I had anticipated. One night, I found myself scrolling through old photos of us on my phone. There we were, smiling on our honeymoon in Maui, laughing at a barbecue with friends, and holding hands during a walk in the mountains. The images felt like snapshots of a different life, one where betrayal didn't hang over our heads like a storm cloud. Laura walked into the living room and saw me looking at the photos. She hesitated before sitting down next to me. "I miss those days," she said softly. I looked at her, my throat tight. "I do too. But sometimes it feels like we can't get back there, like that version of us is gone." Her eyes filled with tears, and she reached for my hand. "I don't believe that, Matt. I think we can be better than we were before. But I know it's going to take time." "Time?" I repeated, nodding. "It feels like that's all we've got." One of the hardest parts of the healing process came when Laura's gallery job required her to attend an out-of-town event for the weekend. It was the first time she would be away since everything had come to light, and the idea of her being miles away, out of my sight, filled me with anxiety. "I can stay if you're not ready for this," Laura said the night before she was supposed to leave. "I don't want to do anything that will make you uncomfortable." Her willingness to change her plans touched me, but I didn't want to be the person who held her back from her career. "No, you should go," I said. "I trust you." The words felt heavy coming out of my mouth, but I meant them. If we were going to rebuild our marriage, I had to start somewhere. Throughout the weekend, Laura called me every morning and night, sometimes even sending photos of the event to reassure me. She kept her promise to stay transparent, and while my anxiety didn't disappear completely, I felt a small glimmer of hope that we might actually be making progress. In therapy, Dr. Ramsey suggested that we focus on creating new memories together rather than dwelling on the past. Laura and I decided to take her advice, starting with small steps. We went out for dinner at a restaurant we'd never been to, spent a Saturday hiking in the nearby foothills, and even took a pottery class together, which led to plenty of laughs and a few hilariously misshapen bowls. These moments reminded me of why I had fallen in love with Laura in the first place. Beneath the pain and betrayal, there was still a connection, a spark that hadn't been completely extinguished. One evening, as we sat on the couch watching a movie, Laura leaned her head on my shoulder. "Thank you for giving me a chance," she whispered. "I know I don't deserve it, but I'm so grateful." I didn't respond right away, letting her words sink in. "Finally," I said, "it's not about deserving. It's about whether we can build something new from this." A few weeks later, Laura surprised me with something that took my breath away. She had recreated one of the first paintings she'd ever shown me, a piece she'd made when we first started dating. The original had been lost years ago, but she had painstakingly worked to recreate it from memory. "I wanted to give this to you," she said, handing me the canvas. "It's a reminder of where we started and where we can go." The painting was beautiful, and it stirred something inside me that I hadn't felt in a long time. For the first time since her affair, I felt a flicker of genuine hope, not just for our marriage, but for the possibility of truly moving forward. As Laura and I continued the journey to rebuild our relationship, I realized that healing wasn't just about forgiveness, it was about understanding. I had spent so much time focusing on her betrayal that I hadn't fully confronted my own role in the cracks that had formed in our marriage. Therapy sessions with Dr. Ramsey forced me to reflect on the ways I had unintentionally contributed to the distance between us. One session, Dr. Ramsey asked me a question that caught me off guard. "Matt, do you feel like you've been as emotionally available to Laura as you wanted her to be for you?" I thought about the long hours I had spent at work, the nights I had come home too exhausted to talk, and the times I had brushed off Laura's attempts to share her struggles because I thought they weren't big enough to warrant concern. The truth was hard to admit. "I guess I haven't been," I said finally. "I thought providing for us was enough, but maybe I wasn't showing up in the way she needed." Laura reached over and squeezed my hand. "I'm not saying any of this is your fault, Matt," she said. "What I did was my choice, and it was wrong. But I think we both got lost somewhere along the way." That session marked a turning point. Instead of focusing solely on the pain of the affair, we began working on rebuilding the foundation of our marriage. It wasn't easy, but it felt like progress. One of the hardest parts of moving forward was confronting the lingering doubts and questions about Laura's affair. I still found myself replaying scenarios in my head, wondering what I could have done differently to prevent it or whether there was more to the story than she had admitted. During one particularly emotional therapy session, I finally voiced my fears. "I'm scared, Laura," I said. "I'm scared that I'll never be able to fully trust you again. That no matter how much progress we make, there will always be this shadow hanging over us." Laura's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't shy away from my words. "I know, Matt," she said, "and I don't expect you to trust me overnight. All I can do is keep showing you that I'm here, that I'm committed to us." I can't change the past, but I can promise you that I'll never take us for granted again. Dr. Ramsey chimed in. Trust isn't about erasing the past. It's about deciding what you want your future to look like. You both have the power to shape that future, but it will require vulnerability and patience. Her words resonated with me. For the first time, I began to see the possibility of a future where the affair didn't define our relationship, but rather became a chapter in a much larger story. Months passed, and while things weren't perfect, they were better. Laura and I began to find joy in the little things again, cooking dinner together, taking evening walks, and laughing over shared memories. We started planning for the future, talking about trips we wanted to take and goals we wanted to achieve together. One weekend, Laura suggested we revisit the Waterpark. The idea initially made my stomach churn, but she explained her reasoning. I don't want that place to hold power over us anymore, she said. I want to replace those memories with something better. Reluctantly, I agreed. When we arrived, the Waterpark was as empty and eerie as I remembered. But instead of focusing on the past, we explored it with fresh eyes, finding humor in its decay and imagining what it must have looked like in its prime. By the end of the visit, I felt a sense of closure I hadn't expected. On the way home, Laura took my hand. Thank you for doing this, she said. It means more to me than you know. A year after discovering Laura's affair, I found myself reflecting on everything we had been through. The pain, the anger, the doubts, they were all still there, but they no longer felt insurmountable. Instead, they felt like pieces of a puzzle we had worked tirelessly to put back together. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching the sunset, Laura turned to me and said, "Do you ever regret giving us a second chance?" Her question caught me off guard, but I didn't have to think long before answering. No, I said. It wasn't easy, and there were times when I wasn't sure we'd make it. But I'm glad we tried. I'm glad we're here. She smiled, her eyes filled with a mixture of relief and gratitude. Me too, she said. I know I'll never stop trying to make it up to you, Matt. And I'll never stop being grateful for the chance you gave me. Forgiveness isn't a one-time act. It's a choice you make every day. And for me, forgiving Laura wasn't about forgetting what had happened. It was about deciding that our love, our history, and our future were worth fighting for. Today, Laura and I are stronger than we've ever been. We've learned to communicate better, to prioritize each other, and to never take our relationship for granted. The scars from her affair will always be there, but they've become part of a larger story, a story of resilience, growth, and the power of choosing love even in the face of heartbreak. A full year after discovering Laura's affair, I found myself sitting on our back porch, reflecting on the tumultuous journey we had taken to get to this point. The emotions I had felt over the past year, anger, sadness, confusion, and even hope, were still present, but they no longer consumed me. They had become like scars, visible reminders of a painful experience, but no longer tender to the touch. Laura joined me on the porch, carrying 2 cups of coffee. She sat down beside me, her presence now a comforting constant rather than a source of anxiety. We watched the sun dip below the horizon, casting a golden glow over the yard. I've been thinking, she said softly, breaking the silence, about everything that's happened and where we are now. It feels surreal. A year ago, I wasn't sure if we'd even be sitting here together. I nodded, my gaze fixed on the horizon. Neither was I admitted. There were times when I thought this was too broken to fix. But somehow, we made it. Because of you, Laura said, her voice steady. You had every reason to walk away, and I wouldn't have blamed you if you had. But you stayed, and you gave me a chance to make things right. I'll never stop being grateful for that. Her words hung in the air, and I let them sink in before responding. It wasn't just me, Laura. You've done the work too. You've shown me that you're committed, that you're willing to change. That's why we're here, not just because I stayed, but because we both fought for this. The decision to stay in a marriage after infidelity isn't something you make once. It's a decision you reaffirm every day. There were days when the weight of the past felt unbearable, when doubts crept in and threatened to unravel the progress we had made. But each time, Laura and I chose to keep moving forward. We had built new habits and traditions that helped us reconnect. Friday nights became our designated date night, where we'd try new restaurants or watch a movie together, no matter how busy our schedules were. We also started journaling together, writing down things we appreciated about each other and sharing them at the end of each week. These small acts of intention created a sense of closeness that had been missing for so long. One of the most pivotal moments came during one of our therapy sessions with Dr. Ramsey. She asked us to describe what we wanted our future to look like, without focusing on the past. I want us to be partners again, Laura said, her voice full of emotion. I want to feel like we're a team, like we're working toward the same goals. I want us to grow old together, knowing we've built something strong and beautiful. Her words struck a chord with me. I want that too, I said. I want to feel secure in what we have, to know that no matter what challenges we face, we'll face them together. And I want to never stop appreciating what we have. Dr. Ramsey smiled. That's a beautiful vision, she said. And it's absolutely attainable. The key is to keep communicating, to keep showing up for each other, even when it's hard. One of the hardest parts of our journey was learning to let go of the pain and resentment that had lingered after Laura's affair. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, and it doesn't erase the hurt. But it does allow you to move forward without being weighed down by the past. I realized that holding on to anger wasn't serving me. It wasn't helping our marriage, and it wasn't helping me heal. Letting go didn't mean I condoned what Laura had done. It meant I was choosing to focus on the present and the future instead of reliving the past. Laura, too, had to let go of her guilt. She had spent months beating herself up for her actions, and while her remorse was important, it was also essential for her to forgive herself so we could truly move forward. Through therapy, she learned to accept responsibility for her choices without letting them define her. On the anniversary of the day I discovered Laura's affair, she surprised me with something I'll never forget. She had recreated one of the first paintings she'd ever shown me when we started dating, a vibrant depiction of a sunrise over the mountains. The original had been lost years ago, but she had painstakingly worked to replicate it. I wanted to give this to you, she said, handing me the painting. It's a reminder of where we started, and a symbol of where we're going. A new beginning. I stared at the painting, my throat tight with emotion. It's beautiful, I said. Thank you. As I hung the painting in our living room later that day, I realized that it wasn't just a piece of art. It was a testament to the work we had done to rebuild our marriage. It was a symbol of resilience, growth, and the choice to fight for something worth saving. Today, Laura and I are in a better place than we've ever been. Our marriage isn't perfect. No marriage is, but it's stronger, more intentional, and filled with a sense of hope that I didn't think was possible a year ago. We've learned to communicate better, to prioritize each other, and to never take our relationship for granted. Forgiveness and healing aren't easy, but they're possible if both people are willing to put in the effort. For anyone reading this who's facing a similar situation, know that it's okay to feel hurt, angry, or uncertain. Take your time, trust your instincts, and remember that healing is a journey, not a destination. As for Laura and me, we're still walking that journey together. And for the first time in a long time, I feel like we're headed in the right direction.